warm welcome to this lesson series on the introduction to the Indian Constitution. In today's lesson, we will have a look at some of the provisions relating to the union and state government in the Constitution. So, we'll have a look at part 5 and part 6 respectively that deal with the union and the state. In particular, we will have a look at some of the provisions and the powers relating to the president. I would like to begin with some foundational principles. So we know that a government, let us say the government of India, has three pillars: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The legislature may be considered the law-making body. The executive is the law-implementing body. And the judiciary is the dispute resolving body. So it resolves the disputes and it also interprets the law. So these are the three pillars upon which the government is founded. There is one more thing that we need to know about the Indian government. You see, the Indian form of governance is a federal structure. What that means is that there is a division of power between the union and the state. Okay, so there is a division of power. In India, the union is slightly stronger, so you can say that it is slightly stronger than the state, yet the principle remains that there is a division of power between the union and the state. So the government exists in tiers. You have the union as the first tier, you also have the state as the second tier. So there are two tiers of government. Let me also tell you that there is a third tier, which is that of the panchayats and municipalities, but I will not speak about them right now. For the time being, let us just focus on union and the state. So we understand that there is a government that operates at the union, which means at the center. And then there's a government that operates at the state, which is the state government. Therefore, in India, we have a central government and we have a state government. So, combining what we have learned in the last couple of minutes, we know that there exists a government at the union, which is the central government, and then there's a state government. And we've also seen that the government consists of the legislature, executive, and judiciary. So the same holds whether it is for the union or for the state. So now I want you to pay attention, which means that there is a union legislature, there is a union executive, there is a union judiciary. Likewise, there is a state legislature, a state executive, and a state judiciary. If you remember, in the beginning of the lesson, I made a mention of union executive. What does that mean? It means it is talking about the executive at the center. Likewise, if I talk about the union judiciary, then it would be talking about the judiciary at the center. If I talk about the state judiciary, it will talk about the judiciary at the state level. So I hope with this diagram you can understand as to what all of these would convey. So as discussed in the beginning of the lesson, the provisions relating to the union can be found in part 5 and those relating to the state can be found in part 6. We will now look at the Bare Act, the Constitution of India, and see some of the provisions and learn as to how you can read the Constitution in order to find out what you need to. So let us go ahead and scroll through the Constitution. So as I scroll down, I go from part 1, part 2, part 3, and then I see part 4, and now we scroll into part 5. Okay, so here you see the part 5, it says the union, and then it talks about the union executive. And here you can see it talks about the president and the vice president, and you have all of these provisions relating to the president. So when you want to know something about the president, then you look here and it tells you everything that you need to know. Scrolling further, you can see the Council of Ministers here. And the Council of Ministers basically talks about the cabinet ministers as well as the prime minister. So 74, that's where you see that. Scrolling further, you see chapter 2, again within part 5. This is the parliament. So it talks about the parliament. The parliament is basically the legislature. I scroll down further, and then you can see the legislative power of the president, which basically means the president also can legislate. I will talk about that in a bit. You can also see the union judiciary, and the union judiciary is basically the Supreme Court. Now, we come to part 6. Part 6 talks about the state. Again, you see the executive, and this time the executive is the governor. Going down further, you see the state legislature, like we said. We've seen the state executive, now we've seen the state legislature. I'll scroll down further. And here you have the legislative power of the governor, which we just saw for the president as well. And here you can see the high courts in the state. So this is the state judiciary. So as you saw, we could see all of the provisions relating to the union, executive, legislature and judiciary. The same thing is there even for the state. And therefore, here you can see at the state level, there are the high courts and then you have the subordinate courts as well. So whenever you want to see a provision relating to any of these, now you know how to browse through part 5 and part 6. We will now just briefly discuss some of the powers of the president. The President of India is the first citizen of the country. Remember that in terms of the Constitution, the President is the constitutional head of the state. The Prime Minister, contrary to what you might suppose, is not the constitutional head of the state. The President holds a much higher position as far as the Constitution is concerned. The President is also the executive head of the state. Therefore, all of the executive action happens in his name. He is also the commander of the defense forces. So he is the chief of the army, air force and the navy. The judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court are also appointed by the President. He also appoints other important officials like the Comptroller and Auditor General, the CAG. He also appoints the chairman of the UPSC and other important constitutional positions. He also has the ordinance making power. So we saw, if you remember, the legislative power of the president, right? Which means he can promulgate ordinances, which means the president can make laws, and that is his ordinance making power, which you find in Article 123 of the Constitution. So as you can see, he appoints the judges, he has judicial functions, he can legislate, he has legislative powers, he has executive powers, he has military powers, and therefore, as you can see, the president is the constitutional head of the state. So if you look at the provisions starting from 53 going up to 62, you will be able to see all of the powers of the president. You'd also be able to see as to what the eligibility for his appointment is, what the conditions are, what the tenure is. So you can see these provisions and you'd know everything about the president. Perhaps you might have found this lesson very fast and you might feel that you've not been able to learn anything. But I want to remind you something, and this is a very important reminder. We are concerned with finding the law rather than knowing the law. And a person who can find the law knows the law. Therefore, what I showed you was as to how you should use the act. And then whenever you want to answer a question, you can go to the act and scroll to the page that you want to, read what you need to know, and then know the relevant portion of the law. So I hope this lesson was of use to you and that it taught you as to how you can see part 5 and part 6 of the Constitution. Thank you so much for your patience. Good day.